So usually when we set out to learn a language, we totally expect it to be, logical, like architecture, right?
Oh, exactly. Yeah, you study the foundation, you get your vocabulary, which acts as your bricks, and the grammar is your mortar.
Right. And eventually you build this really sturdy, reliable, predictable house where every single word has its neat little place.
Right, which is the exact promise of every textbook out there. You're taught this structurally sound way to communicate basic facts or ask for directions or, order a coffee without the whole building collapsing on you.
Yeah, but then you step into the world of human emotion, specifically the world of romantic relationships. And suddenly that neat little linguistic house you built is just caught in a Category 5 hurricane.
It really is. It gets completely destroyed.
It turns out that when native English speakers talk about love or dating or heartbreak, they abandon those logical blueprints completely. So welcome to today's deep dive. We are taking a stack of source materials, specifically a really detailed advanced English lesson, and we're looking at how it dissects the colorful, honestly kind of chaotic idioms we use to describe romance.
And it's such a great topic for you listening because, looking at these phrases chronologically offers this amazing window into human psychology.
Oh, for sure.
Because these idioms, they aren't just quirky phrases you memorize for a test. They're the literal mechanisms by which a culture processes the really visceral experience of intimacy.
Yeah, our mission today is to decode this emotional vocabulary, charting the entire life cycle of a relationship from that very first spark to the inevitable, messy aftermath. Because textbook English rarely teaches you how to actually gossip about a bad date.
No, it really doesn't.
Okay, let's unpack this. When I think about how my friends describe meeting their partners, it is rarely a story of careful, rational assessment. Nobody ever says, I evaluated their personality traits and decided to initiate a courtship.
No, nobody talks like that in real life.
Right. It's always so immediate and very visual. They say things like, I saw him across the bar and he caught my eye.
Right, caught my eye. Notice the phrasing there, right? It suggests that your vision was actively snagged, like it was captured. It's a totally involuntary response.
It's like a trap, almost.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Before your prefrontal cortex has even had a chance to process who this person is, your visual cortex has already hijacked your attention. The language implies that the person's physical presence literally reached out and grabbed your focus, taking away your ability to look anywhere else.
Wow, yeah. So your attention is captured, you walk over, and you start talking. And if things go well, we obviously don't say we conversed adequately. We say we hit it off.
Right, you hit it off.
And I always picture this mechanically, like two gears snapping together and just spinning perfectly without any grinding.
Well, that mechanical analogy is incredibly apt, actually. Hitting it off originally has roots in the idea of striking sparks, or things matching up perfectly on the very first try.
Oh, like striking a match.
Yes. It describes an immediate, almost frictionless connection. You just bypass all the usual awkward stumbling of a first conversation and find this instant conversational momentum.
And if that momentum keeps building, you start falling in love. And this is where the language gets incredibly dramatic. The sources point out that you don't just experience love, you are head over heels. You don't just enjoy their company, you let them sweep you off your feet.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at this pattern, and it sounds less like meeting a wonderful partner and more like surviving a catastrophic loss of gravity.
It really does sound dangerous, doesn't it?
Yeah. Tumbling, losing your footing, having your world turned upside down. It's like being on a roller coaster when the safety bar suddenly pops open. Why do all these early romance idioms involve falling or losing your balance?
Well, what's fascinating here is that the linguistics of early love in English specifically framed the experience as this overwhelming physical force that actively removes your agency.
Removes your agency? How do you mean?
Think about the verbs at play here. You don't decide to enter love, you fall into it. You are swept away. To be head over heels actually traces back to the 14th century as heels over head, which literally meant to do a somersault.
Wait, really? A literal somersault?
Yeah, a somersault. It's a somatosensory disorientation. The language is actively telling you that true romance requires a complete surrender of physical and logical control.
Wow. Okay, so if the surrender goes perfectly, the sources call it a match made in heaven, a pairing so flawless it feels like, designed by destiny, far above the messy realities of Earth.
Right, far above Earth. But the problem is we do actually live on Earth.
Right.
And that initial chemical blindness, the honeymoon phase, it has an expiration date.
It always does.
Once the novelty of the honeymoon phase wears off, the brain goes through a real cognitive shift. It stops prioritizing pure attachment and starts prioritizing long-term survival.
Okay.
And in the context of a relationship, that means scanning your environment for threats.
Which brings us directly into the modern dating minefield. We all know the absolute dread of encountering a red flag or the sting of being ghosted. But looking at the language itself, what really stands out is how the vocabulary suddenly strips away all that romantic, gravitational poetry and just replaces it with the cold, sterile terminology of, like, a safety inspection.
That's a great way to put it. A red flag is a literal warning sign on a racetrack or maybe on a beach, indicating immediate structural danger.
Right, like, do not swim here.
Exactly. And in dating, we use it to describe behaviors that predict future toxicity, like being inexplicably rude to a waiter on a first date.
Classic red flag.
Right. So we've shifted from the language of magic and destiny to the language of risk assessment. We are actively looking for green flags to signal a safe path forward and red flags to warn us of hidden explosives.
And speaking of explosives, sometimes the danger doesn't actually blow up in your face. It vanishes. The sources highlight ghosting as a staple of modern dating vocabulary.
Oh, ghosting's a brutal one.
It is. You go on 3 great dates, the connection feels solid, and then the person simply ceases to exist digitally. No texts, no calls, no explanation. Just poof.
And ghosting is a fascinating linguistic evolution because it perfectly describes the mechanism of the digital age. Technology allows us to completely bypass the biological discomfort of witnessing someone else's emotional pain.
Oh, wow. Yeah, because you don't have to look at them.
Exactly. By turning a human being into a disposable digital avatar, you can just delete them from your reality like a phantom. You vanish without a trace, leaving the other person literally haunted by the lack of closure.
Haunted. Yeah, that's exactly what it feels like. It is a brutal vanishing act. But there are behaviors that string the pain out even longer. The sources bring up stringing someone along and leading someone on. And I have to say, here's where it gets really interesting for me. When I first read through these, my initial thought was that they are functionally identical.
A lot of people think that, yeah.
Right. I mean, aren't they both just the act of lying to someone about your intentions? Is stringing someone along really any different from leading someone on?
They are actually quite different. The mechanism of the deception is different for each phrase. They attack different vulnerabilities in the person being deceived.
Okay, break that down for me.
Sure. So stringing someone along is a deception regarding time and logistics. Imagine someone who refuses to call you their boyfriend or girlfriend, but they demand your absolute exclusivity.
Ugh, the worst.
Right. They are keeping you tethered, literally on a string, pulling you forward into a future they know full well will never materialize. They are stealing your timeline.
Oh, I see. So they are keeping you as a backup option while basically burning your calendar.
Exactly.
So how does leading someone on operate then?
Leading someone on targets the emotional reality rather than the timeline. It's the active simulation of romantic feelings.
Oh, so faking it.
Yes, it's faking deep emotional investment to extract validation or attention or intimacy when in reality, the feelings are completely hollow. So one manipulates your schedule while the other manipulates your perception of reality.
Wow. Both just leave you completely disoriented. But, okay, let's assume you manage to navigate the minefield. You assess the red flags, you survive the ghosts, you don't get strung along. You enter the long haul of a serious, committed relationship.
The promised land.
Right. But the transition in the vocabulary here is actually jarring. The language of sudden heartbreak just disappears, and we enter the language of slow erosion.
Yes. If we connect this to the bigger picture, long-term relationship idioms abandon those sudden dramatic actions of early dating. They focus heavily on structural integrity and the slow, almost imperceptible passage of time.
The sources mention a relationship being on the rocks. So the metaphor completely moves from flying and falling to trying to keep a massive structure from cracking. I always picture like tectonic plates with this kind of long-term language.
Tectonic plates, yeah.
2 massive, heavy objects just grinding against each other. You don't notice the movement day to day, but the friction builds up for years until a tiny shift causes a massive earthquake.
That's a great visual. And the nautical interpretation of on the rocks serves a very similar mechanical purpose. A ship that has crashed onto a rocky shore isn't necessarily destroyed instantly.
Right. It's just stuck.
It's grounded, it's taking on water. It is in a state of severe, sustained distress, much like a marriage after, say, a devastating financial crisis. The focus is on the burden of trying to salvage a severely compromised structure.
Yeah, and sometimes the structure doesn't crash into anything at all. The sources also talk about couples who drift apart.
Drifting apart. The tragedy of imperceptible motion.
Yeah, it sounds so sad, but so quiet.
It is. To drift apart implies that no single explosive event ruined the relationship. There was no betrayal. There was no sudden storm. The two people simply stopped rowing in the same direction, and the subtle currents of life just pull them into entirely different oceans over the course of a decade.
But what happens when you don't drift apart? What happens when you stay anchored together in, like, a 2-bedroom apartment for 5 years?
And then you get the friction of proximity.
Exactly. The friction creates its own vocabulary.
Yeah.
The idiom is that you start to drive each other up the wall.
I love this one. Consider the physiology of that phrase. To drive someone up the wall describes the feeling of being completely cornered.
Right. Nowhere to go.
In a shared living space, when the repetitive, annoying habits of your partner become just too much, your biological flight response is activated. But because you live there, you can't flee horizontally.
You're trapped by the walls.
Exactly. The irritation is so profound you feel compelled to escape vertically, literally climbing the walls to get away from the source of the annoyance.
It perfectly captures why tiny things become monumental. It's rarely a massive philosophical disagreement that drives you up the wall. It's the sound of them chewing their cereal.
Or leaving a wet towel on the bathroom floor.
Yes. Every single morning for 1,800 consecutive mornings, the resentment just stacks up ounce by ounce until you hit what the sources call the final straw.
And the straw that broke the camel's back is the ultimate idiom of cumulative weight. It describes a structural, load-bearing failure.
Like the entire foundation giving way.
Exactly. The final straw itself might be microscopic, like forgetting to buy milk on the way home, or maybe a seemingly harmless white lie. But placed on top of years of uncommunicated resentment and unresolved tension, it causes the entire spine of the relationship to just snap.
And that structural collapse obviously forces the termination of the relationship. The vocabulary English provides for the end of a romance spans this massive spectrum, from like respectful bureaucracy to just unfiltered brutality.
It really does. On the respectful end, we have couples who decide to call it quits or split up. These terms imply a mutual, almost administrative decision to cease operations.
Like a business transaction?
Pretty much. It's two people looking at the accumulated damage, perhaps after months of couples therapy, and just agreeing that the structure cannot be salvaged.
Right. And if they manage that delicate process without letting the resentment boil over, they might part ways on good terms. It sounds exactly like dissolving a successful business partnership. You respect the years you put in, you divide the assets fairly, and you promise not to speak ill of each other at industry events.
Very civilized. But the contrast to that mutual dissolution is the sudden unilateral termination, the informal, heavily visceral act of dumping someone.
Dumping. It strips away all the humanity of the process. You don't dump a person, you know. You dump a load of dirt or garbage or like excess cargo that is dragging down your ship. To be dumped, especially in a brutal, modern way, like receiving a 2-sentence text message ending a 3-year relationship, is to be treated as entirely disposable mass.
It is the ultimate rejection of the other person's emotional reality. You are offloading the relationship instantly, refusing to carry the weight of a mutual separation.
And if you are on the receiving end of that text message, your whole world collapses. You are grieving, you call a friend, and they offer you the most classic, universally recognized idiom of comfort in the English language. They pat your shoulder and tell you, don't worry, there are plenty of fish in the sea.
Yes, the classic.
So what does this all mean? I really want to pause and challenge this deeply. We use this phrase constantly, but if you actually look at the mechanics of it, is it comforting?
A lot of people would say no.
Right, because think about it. If I lose a custom-engraved watch that I've worn every single day for 5 years and I'm totally devastated, telling me that the Rolex factory is currently producing thousands of other watches does not make me miss mine any less. It feels like a really cold dismissal of a highly specific, irreplaceable bond.
Well, your reaction to the phrase is entirely natural. Because in the immediate aftermath of heartbreak, the brain is absolutely flooded with the chemical withdrawal of attachment. You feel that this specific person is utterly irreplaceable.
Because they were, to you at least.
Exactly. So the idiom does feel dismissive if you view it as an attempt to validate the grief. But it doesn't function to validate grief. It actually functions as emotional triage.
Oh, interesting. Explain the triage aspect of it.
Okay, so when a relationship shatters, a person's worldview physically and psychologically shrinks. They enter a state of profound cognitive scarcity. They genuinely believe they have lost their one and singular chance at happiness and that the future is entirely barren.
We've all been there.
Right. So the phrase, "plenty of fish in the sea," is designed to be a linguistic shock to the system. It is deployed specifically to force the grieving brain out of a scarcity mindset and forcefully reintroduce the concept of abundance.
Oh, I see. So it's not minimizing the lost relationship at all. It's aggressively reminding you of the sheer scale of the world.
Exactly. The language is acting as a corrective lens. It reminds you that your romantic journey hasn't ended just because one specific ship crashed on the rocks. The ocean itself hasn't gone anywhere, and its capacity to provide connection remains completely infinite.
Wow. It's harsh medicine, but it breaks the illusion that you are stranded on a deserted island. We have truly mapped a chaotic life cycle today. From the moment your visual cortex is hijacked and someone catches your eye, to the terrifying physics of tumbling head over heels. We've navigated the sterile safety inspections of red flags, survived the digital deletions of ghosts, and felt the tectonic grinding weight of the long haul.
We really have. And for you listening, understanding these idioms goes far beyond passing a vocabulary test. It grants you the emotional intelligence to articulate the exact nuanced mechanism of human connection. It allows you to explain not just the logistics of a breakup, but the specific architectural failure of the romance.
Absolutely. And as we wrap up this deep dive into the source material, I want to leave you with a final thought to maybe mull over on your own. Linguists often discuss how the language we use actively shapes the reality we perceive.
The Spear-Whorf hypothesis, essentially.
Right. So if our culture relies on a vocabulary that frames love as a chaotic, forceful loss of gravity, where we are swept away, spun head over heels, and eventually crashed on the rocks, does this language actually condition us to expect extreme emotional turbulence?
That's a profound question.
Are we subconsciously wired to seek out the roller coaster because our idioms tell us that peaceful, quiet coexistence simply isn't romantic enough? Maybe we don't actually want that neat, predictable, sturdy architectural house. Maybe deep down, we're all just looking for the exact right person to stand in the hurricane with. Keep questioning the words you use, and we will catch you on the next deep dive. Usually when we talk about a medical diagnosis, there's this expectation of absolute clinical precision.
Oh, right, yeah. It's very cut and dry.
Exactly. It's like engineering. You break your arm, the x-ray shows that jagged white line on the glowing screen.
Right, the doctor just points to it and says, well, there it is.
Yeah, it's clean. And psychologically, I think there is something just deeply comforting about that.
Oh, absolutely.
We humans, we love for things to be visible. We love to categorize, to put things in neat little boxes, with clear labels so we know exactly how to treat the problem.
But then, you step out of the hospital and into the world of modern romance and human connection, and suddenly...
the x-ray is gone.
Completely. That x-ray machine is completely useless. The whole machinery of logic just... well, it breaks down.
It really does. We find ourselves looking at a diagnostic landscape that is just entirely murky. And that is exactly our mission today. We are wading straight into those muddy waters for this deep dive.
It's definitely a deep dive into the deep end.
Right. We're trying to decode the incredibly fast-evolving, highly emotionally charged language of romance and relationships.
And we are using a curated lesson on advanced native-level English vocabulary to do this. But, really, this isn't just about memorizing words.
No, not at all.
This vocabulary acts as a perfect microscopic lens into how we mentally and culturally process love today, and anxiety and commitment.
Which is exactly what makes the linguistics of romance so endlessly fascinating to me.
Right. We aren't just looking at a dictionary list here.
No.
We are looking at the specific cultural and psychological tools that speakers literally invent to navigate some of the most complex, treacherous emotional terrain imaginable.
Because language always adapts to the environment, right?
Exactly. When a new social phenomenon or a new psychological trap arises, we have to invent new words just to survive it.
Okay, so let's really unpack this, because today's deep dive actually acts as a sort of part two to a broader discussion on relationships that we started earlier.
Yes, the earlier material.
Right. In that earlier source material, the focus was entirely on the extremes. It was all about the dizzying highs, you know?
Fun stuff.
Yeah, that uncontrollable feeling of like falling head over heels for someone or catching their eye from across the room.
Right, the initial spark.
But then it sharply pivoted to the brutal, harsh reality of sudden endings, like the absolute deafening silence of ghosting.
Which is just a true emotional roller coaster. I mean, it's characterized by very sharp peaks and very sudden drops.
Right. But today, our focus is shifting away from those simple, clean extremes.
We're getting into the mess.
We're diving into the extreme complexities of the modern dating landscape. We're going to explore the vocabulary of the gray areas.
The worst areas.
The agonizing, undefined middle ground where, let's be honest, most people actually get stuck.
Yeah, they do.
And then ultimately, we are going to trace the profound, historically rich vocabulary of long-term, lifelong commitment.
Which is great, because if we look closely at the trajectory of our conversation today, it perfectly mirrors the actual chronological trajectory of a serious relationship.
Ah, that's a good point. It really does.
Right. We are going to start right in the thick of the confusing, ambiguous, highly anxiety-inducing traps of modern dating.
The fun stuff.
Exactly. Then we'll examine the psychological breaking points that force us to transition out of that ambiguity through decisive, life-altering actions.
Right.
And finally, we will explore the beautiful, resilient vocabulary used for lifelong marriage and the vital, everyday work of relationship repair.
So whether you are currently out there, actively swiping through the chaotic modern dating scene,
Or maybe you've been happily married for 3 decades.
Exactly. Or perhaps you're just a deeply curious student of human nature, this progression is going to resonate with you.
Because understanding these idioms gives you a crystal clear window into the modern human condition.
It does. And survival is really the perfect word for our first stop. We are plunging straight into the murkiest waters of modern romance, into the undefined phases that cause the absolute most anxiety.
I'm stressed just thinking about it.
Right. And the first term from our advanced English lesson is a word that strikes just primal fear into the hearts of single people everywhere.
Oh, I know what this is.
The dreaded situationship.
Yeah. Just hearing the syllables makes you physically tense up.
Yeah.
It's a brilliant piece of modern slang, really.
It's linguistically incredibly clever.
It is.
Because situationship is a portmanteau, right?
Yeah.
It's a blend of the words situation and relationship, and it describes a romantic or sexual arrangement that is entirely undefined.
Right. It is the illusion of a relationship, entirely devoid of the infrastructure.
Wow, yeah. The illusion.
You're acting exactly like a couple. You might go on dates, spend time together, sleep together. Maybe you even meet each other's friends.
Oh, meeting the friends is the worst part because it feels so real.
Exactly. But there is absolutely no official commitment. There are no labels. And crucially, there is no clear future parameter.
I've been trying to figure out exactly why this specific dynamic feels so uniquely exhausting. And here is where my head went.
Okay, let's hear it.
Treating romance like a situationship is exactly like signing up for a free trial software subscription.
A free trial.
Think about it. You download the app, you get access to all the premium features, you use the interface every day, you get all the actual benefits of the product.
Right, you're streaming the movies, you're using the software.
But inevitably, that pop-up screen appears asking you to officially sign up, to enter your credit card, and to actually commit to a subscription.
Okay, I see where you're going with this.
And what does the situationship partner do?
They hit remind me later.
They just keep hitting the remind me later button. They want to utilize all the features of a partner, but they absolutely refuse to officially subscribe to the relationship.
That is a remarkably accurate and deeply frustrating analogy. It perfectly captures the asymmetry of the dynamic.
It's so asymmetrical.
One person feels like they're providing premium value, while the other person is endlessly extending their free trial.
Right.
And the material we're looking at provides a highly specific, very realistic example of this exact pain point.
Yeah, the example of the friend.
Exactly. Someone complaining to a friend saying, we've been hanging out for 6 months, but he won't call me his girlfriend. I'm stuck in a situationship.
6 months, half a year of your life, doing all the emotional labor of a girlfriend. providing all the companionship without the dignity of the label.
It's a huge investment of time.
I'm trying to figure out what this means from a deeper psychological standpoint. Like, why did society suddenly need to invent this specific advanced level slang term? Did this not exist before?
Well, it's a fascinating question of linguistic necessity, really. We didn't need this word 50 years ago because the social scripts of the past were much more rigid. They were highly structured.
Right, you courted, you went steady.
You got engaged.
Yeah.
The boundaries between single and taken were heavily policed by societal norms.
Yeah, everybody in town knew your status.
Exactly. But today, with the advent of dating apps and the gamification of romance, those boundaries have entirely dissolved.
They're gone.
The illusion of infinite optionality makes people terrified to close the door on other possibilities. So we needed to invent this term, this C2 level term, because it perfectly captures a very modern systemic trap.
It's a state of purgatory.
Purgatory is the exact right word. You see, the human brain is essentially a prediction machine.
Okay.
It constantly scans the environment to predict what will happen next so it can keep us safe. It craves certainty.
It wants to know if the tiger is going to attack.
Exactly. So when you act like a couple but actively lack the label, your brain is constantly trying to solve a puzzle that has missing pieces.
Oh, that sounds exhausting.
It is. You are receiving all the physical and emotional data of a relationship, but the cognitive data, the label, is being intentionally withheld.
Wow.
Situationship gives a name to that specific modern cognitive dissonance.
It's giving a name to the pain. And speaking of the psychological pain of modern dating, there is another behavior that often traps people in these situationships.
Yes.
It's the next term in our deep dive, and it's a heavy one. Breadcrumbing.
This is a truly insidious one.
Insidious is the absolute right word. The etymology here relies on this vivid, almost grim fairy tale imagery.
Like Hansel and Gretel.
Exactly. Imagine walking through a dark, confusing forest, and someone is leaving a tiny, sparse trail of breadcrumbs on the ground just to keep a starving bird hopping along.
Following them deeper into the woods.
Right, luring them in.
Luring them in step by step, but never actually providing a sustaining meal.
Yeah, you're just getting these tiny crumbs. But I really want to push back on this concept for a second, or at least contrast it with what we discussed in the previous material.
Okay, let's contrast it.
We talked about ghosting, the act of completely disappearing, severing all contact with zero explanation.
Right, total silence.
I'm trying to figure out the hierarchy of bad behavior here, honestly. I feel like breadcrumbing might actually be significantly worse than being ghosted. Am I off base here?
Not at all.
Because at least with ghosting, you have a definitive end. The door slams shut. You can mourn it, process the rejection, and move on with your life.
You're entirely right.
Breadcrumbing feels like a psychological hostage situation.
You are not off base at all. In fact, you're hitting on a profound psychological truth about the mechanics of emotional manipulation.
Okay.
You are entirely correct about the lack of finality. Ghosting is an abrupt emotional amputation.
Amputation.
Ouch. It is brutal, yes, but the healing can begin immediately. The limb is gone.
Right.
Breadcrumbing, on the other hand, is a slow starvation. Let's break down the precise execution of breadcrumbing because it is highly calculated.
It doesn't happen by accident.
No. It operates on the psychological principle of intermittent reinforcement.
Wait, intermittent reinforcement like a slot machine at a casino.
Precisely like a slot machine. If a slot machine never paid out, you would stop pulling the lever immediately. You'd walk away.
Yeah, it would just be a broken machine.
And if it paid out every single time, well, it would be a predictable transaction, not an addiction.
You'd just be doing a job.
Right. The addiction comes from the unpredictability, the tiny random rewards. Breadcrumbing is the romantic equivalent of a slot machine.
Oh my gosh. That is so dark.
It is. The perpetrator gives the absolute bare minimum amount of effort required to keep you at the machine.
So they're not silent.
It is not silence. They are still replying to you, but they are deploying tiny, low-effort signals.
So what does that actually look like in practice?
It's sending a random, flirtatious good morning text on a Tuesday and then vanishing for 3 days.
Right.
Or, incredibly commonly in today's digital landscape, it's just liking an Instagram story.
Oh, the Instagram, just a casual double tap on a piece of glass.
Exactly.
It's the absolute lowest possible calorie expenditure of human attention.
That's a great way to put it. It requires zero actual commitment, zero vulnerability, and zero real-world effort.
None at all.
But what makes it breadcrumbing, and what makes it so uniquely cruel, is that while they are dropping these little digital hints of interest to trigger your dopamine, they are actively refusing to escalate the connection into reality.
They won't see you in person.
Right. The classic example from the source material is the person who constantly cancels real-world dates. They are always, too busy with work or feeling overwhelmed.
Oh, always an excuse.
But they consistently watch all your social media stories within 5 minutes of you posting them and occasionally text you inside jokes.
It's maddening because it forces you to become a detective in your own life.
It really does.
You literally sit there analyzing a thumbs up emoji, trying to extract a declaration of love from it.
It is a calculated tactic to keep someone on the hook.
On the hook.
Yes. The person doing the breadcrumbing usually wants the ego boost of knowing you are still there.
They like the attention.
They enjoy the validation of an audience, but they have absolutely no intention of ever making a commitment. They are keeping you in their orbit, essentially benching you in case they ever decide they want you.
Like a backup player.
Exactly. Which, let's be honest, they almost never do.
Okay, so if breadcrumbing is the tactic, then the situationship is the prison cell you eventually end up in because of it.
Yes.
You follow the crumbs right into the cage.
That is exactly how the two concepts interlock.
Look, this is getting heavy, and frankly, it's emotionally exhausting to even talk about.
It's a bleak landscape out there.
It is, and if you are listening to this right now and you're nodding along because you've been trapped in this cycle, we deeply feel your pain.
We've all been there, or know someone who has.
Right. But here is the pivotal question. How does one escape this? The human brain can't sustain that level of anxiety forever.
It can't.
At some point, you hit a breaking point. How do you break out of the exhausting, endless loop of situationships and breadcrumbs?
Well, escaping the gray area requires something that the gray area actively discourages.
Which is?
A definitive, irrevocable choice.
Action.
Action. And as we transition out of this phase of modern dating, you'll notice the vocabulary shifts dramatically. To get out of the murky waters, you have to make a choice that is often terrifying. You have to force an action.
Which brings us to a really visceral idiom from our lesson, take the plunge.
Yes, the linguistic pivot from passive to active.
The literal translation of this phrase is so evocative. Literally, to take the plunge means to physically jump or dive into deep, potentially dangerous water.
Like off a cliff.
Right. But metaphorically, it means to finally commit to doing something very important or very risky after thinking about it for a long, long time.
The key element in that definition is the internal timeline. This isn't an impulsive, drunken act.
It's not a whim.
No, it is the combination of immense internal friction.
Right. Now, people usually use the analogy of standing on a high diving board to explain this. Toes curled over the edge, looking down at the pool, your heart pounding.
It's a common image.
But honestly, I think that's too safe.
Too safe?
Yeah, a diving board implies there's a lifeguard, right?
Mm-hmm.
And a perfectly chlorinated pool waiting for you at the bottom.
A completely controlled environment.
Exactly. And romantic commitment isn't controlled. You don't know what's at the bottom. I think a better analogy for taking the plunge is the historical concept of burning your ships.
Oh, I like that.
Imagine you are an explorer. You've sailed across a terrifying ocean. You land on a new, unknown shore.
Right.
And to ensure that your crew commits to the new world, to ensure that absolutely no one retreats when things get hard, you order the ships to be burned to the ashes.
That is a much more intense and, frankly, more accurate representation of the psychological stakes involved here.
You cannot unjump. You cannot unburn the ships. Taking the plunge means removing your own safety net.
You're destroying your backup plan.
Yes. You are leaving the orbital hold of the situationship and committing to atmospheric reentry. You might burn up or you might land safely, but either way, you are falling.
The specific example we see often in the material is the couple who dates for 5 years.
Oh, great.
Living in separate apartments, keeping their finances separate, maintaining their own little escape routes, basically. And then finally they decide to take the plunge and move in together.
5 years of standing on the shore, looking back at the ships, wondering if they should sail away or burn them.
Exactly. 5 years of deliberation, of weighing the pros and cons, of paralyzing internal hesitation, and then finally the action. The plunge.
What's also fascinating here is that this idiom isn't exclusively romantic.
Oh, it's highly versatile.
Yeah.
It applies to any scenario where the risk of failure is high, but the potential reward requires total commitment. You hear it often in entrepreneurship.
Oh, sure. Quitting a stable, boring, well-paying corporate job with health benefits to launch a startup with zero guaranteed income.
Exactly. That is taking the plunge.
But it is deeply poignant when applied to relationships because romantic commitment is arguably the most profound risk we take as humans.
It really is.
You are risking your emotional stability, your living situation, your financial future, and your time, which is the one resource you can never earn back.
Right.
So when you take the plunge in love, you are acknowledging the terrifying risk and deciding that this specific person is worth burning the ships for.
And this brings us to the natural consequence of taking that leap.
Yeah.
Because, what happens after the plunge?
Well, eventually the adrenaline wears off.
It has to.
The human brain simply cannot sustain a high-wire act of constant risk and intense passion forever. You would physically burn out.
Your cortisol levels would be through the roof.
Right. The turbulence starts to settle, and the vocabulary moves from sudden, violent action to sustained stability.
Which perfectly introduces our next idiom. Settle down.
Let's really analyze this phrase because I think the word settle gets a bad rap.
It does. People view it negatively.
Sometimes people say, oh, don't settle, meaning don't accept something subpar, like don't settle for a bad job.
Right.
But settling down is entirely different. Think about the contrast in human behavior over a lifespan. You spend your 20s with this high-octane energy, partying every single weekend, chasing promotions, constantly traveling.
I was looking for the next big thrill or the next swipe on an app.
Yes. It's a chaotic, kinetic energy.
It is the energy of exploration.
But eventually, for most people, a deep psychological shift occurs. A profound desire for a quieter lifestyle takes over. You physically and psychologically need the dust to clear.
You really do.
And the language reflects that gravity. Settling literally refers to particles suspended in a chaotic liquid finally coming to rest at the bottom, creating a solid foundation.
That shift from kinetic energy to potential energy.
Exactly. But I'm curious, how do we define that rest in modern society? What does settling down actually look like in practice, beyond just, feeling tired of going to loud bars?
Well, sociologically, settling down is defined by very specific, tangible markers of stability.
Okay.
It is not just an emotional state. It is an architectural change to your life. It means adopting a stable, predictable routine.
Which sounds boring in your 20s, but amazing in your 30s.
Oh, absolutely. It often involves getting married, consolidating your resources, buying a permanent home.
A piece of property you intend to stay in for decades.
Right. And perhaps starting a family.
It's basically building your nest.
It is. It's the linguistic and cultural shift from chaos to predictability. When someone says, I'm ready to settle down, they're sending a very clear signal to the marketplace.
The dating marketplace.
Exactly. They're declaring that they no longer want the chaotic, adrenaline-fueled unknown of the gray areas. They're exhausted by the situationship.
Right.
They don't want to decipher breadcrumbs anymore. They want roots.
You want the solid ground. And once that internal, deeply personal decision is made, once someone decides they are ready to put down those roots and build the nest, something fascinating happens.
The transition.
The private choice becomes a public spectacle. We move from internal psychology to very external, very structured cultural rituals.
This is where the English language becomes incredibly evocative.
It really does.
We have a highly specific, very theatrical vocabulary reserved entirely for the act of formalizing a union.
And here's where the sociology of romance gets really interesting to me. Let's look at the proposal itself. In English, we almost never just plainly state the facts.
No, we don't.
We don't say, he logically asked her to enter a marital contract, and she agreed.
It sounds so clinical.
So robotic.
Yeah.
Instead, we use a highly dynamic, almost explosive idiom. We say, they popped the question.
Pop the question. It's an incredibly physical phrase.
Let's zero in on that specific word, pop. Why pop? When I think of that verb, I think of a balloon bursting. I think of a champagne cork hitting the ceiling.
Right.
I think of suddenness, surprise, and a massive release of pent-up energy.
The word choice is brilliant, actually, because it describes the mechanics of the event perfectly.
But I want to debate the premise of this for a second. Why does society demand the pop? Think about the classic picturesque scene. A nervous partner secretly buys a ridiculously expensive ring, hides it for months, orchestrates a sunset dinner at a fancy restaurant by the beach.
Coordinates with a hidden photographer.
Right. Sweats through the appetizers and then suddenly drops to one knee. Why do we require this pressure cooker performance?
A lot of pressure.
Why does society demand a surprise theatrical event instead of a mutual, calm, rational conversation between two adults about their shared future?
That is a phenomenal sociological question. It speaks to our modern expectations of romantic entertainment.
Entertainment, that's a good word for it.
Historically, marriage was a deeply pragmatic economic transaction negotiated by families. It wasn't about love.
It was about land and cows.
Exactly. But as society evolved and marriage became primarily about romantic love, the proposal had to carry the weight of that romance. The pop is necessary because we demand a narrative climax.
We want a story to tell our friends.
Precisely. We want the cinematic moment. The psychology leading up to that moment is literally a pressure cooker.
Oh, the stress must be insane.
It is. The person proposing has been carrying the weight of this secret, absorbing all the logistical stress, managing the risk of a potential public rejection.
Which is terrifying.
The pressure builds and builds like a carbonated drink shaken vigorously. And then the question itself, will you marry me, is the sudden explosive release of all that built-up tension. It pops.
Wow.
It's a single life-altering sentence that shatters the status quo in a fraction of a second.
It's the ultimate romantic catharsis. Okay, so the tension is released, the question is popped, the tears are shed, the answer is yes.
Hopefully, yes.
Hopefully. And now we move to the logistical reality, the wedding day itself. And English gives us two vastly different idioms for the actual act of getting married, which I think reveals a sort of cultural split personality we have regarding weddings.
The juxtaposition of these two phrases tells us everything about how differently people view the institution of marriage.
Let's start with the first one, get hitched. The classic example is someone casually dropping into conversation, oh yeah, we are getting hitched in Vegas next spring.
Get hitched is a fascinating piece of linguistic history. It's very informal, very breezy, and almost a little rebellious.
Rebellious how?
If you look at the etymology, to hitch originally meant to fasten a working animal, like a horse or a mule, to a wagon or a plow.
Wait, really? So it's basically comparing marriage to farm labor.
In a way, yes, there's a deeply humorous, self-deprecating undertone to it.
That is amazing.
It implies getting tethered to another person, putting on the yoke, but it does so in a very casual, low-stakes way. It actively strips away the pomp and circumstance.
So the Vegas next spring example perfectly matches the vibe of the word.
Exactly. It implies that maybe an Elvis impersonator is involved. Maybe you're wearing sunglasses inside. It's fun. It's spontaneous.
Right. You do not send out heavy, gold-embossed calligraphy invitations on handmade paper announcing that you are getting hitched.
No, you send a text message.
It's an idiom that actively rejects the wedding industrial complex.
Exactly. It says, we love each other, but we aren't taking ourselves too seriously.
But the second idiom, this one is entirely different. This one has gravity. This one has profound historical weight. Tie the knot.
Tie the knot is perhaps the most universally recognized English idiom for marriage, and for very profound reasons.
Okay.
When we trace the origins of this phrase, we are doing linguistic archaeology. We are digging up a beautiful, ancient human tradition.
I was reading about the origin of this, and it absolutely blew my mind. It's not just a cute metaphor about tying your shoes.
Not at all. Historically, tying the knot originates from ancient Celtic and pagan wedding rituals, often called hand fasting.
Hand fasting.
Yes. During the ceremony, the hands or wrists of the bride and groom were literally physically bound together with a braided ribbon, a cord, or a piece of cloth.
I want to just sit with that visual for a second.
It's powerful.
Imagine standing in a forest or a stone circle, surrounded by your entire community, and having your physical body bound to another person's body. The immense psychological weight of feeling the knot pull tight against your skin.
It was a literal physical manifestation of an invisible, unbreakable emotional bond. Two separate, distinct threads of life being woven into a single, complex knot that cannot easily be undone without cutting the fabric.
Wow.
Over the centuries, as religions changed and modern ceremonies evolved, the actual physical ritual faded away in many cultures. But the linguistic memory survived.
The ghost of the ritual lives on in our mouths.
Exactly. So today, when we say they tied the knot, we are unknowingly echoing a 1,000-year-old understanding that marriage isn't just a contract. It is the physical and spiritual binding of two lives into a single, resilient entity.
That is incredibly beautiful. It really makes you appreciate the invisible weight of the words we throw around every day.
It does.
But it also brings up a very hard, very necessary truth.
Which is?
We've talked about the cinematic sunset proposal, the beautiful, spiritual, hand-tying ceremony. But the wedding, The wedding is just a party. It's just one single day.
The wedding is the launch pad. It is not the journey.
The marriage, the actual lived reality of the relationship, is an ongoing, sometimes exhausting, everyday process. And no marriage, no matter how profoundly the knot was tied, is perfectly smooth 100% of the time.
That is the gritty reality of the long haul. The vocabulary of romance cannot end at the altar. If it did, we would have no way to describe the next 50 years.
Right.
We critically need words for maintenance, for resilience, and for conflict.
And we definitely need words for trouble. In the early parts of this broader relationship study, there was an idiom about a relationship being on the rocks.
Right. On the rocks is a term born of maritime disaster. It implies severe existential danger.
Like a shipwreck.
Exactly. Think of a wooden ship crashing against jagged hidden rocks in a storm. The hull is breached, the structure of the relationship is rapidly taking on water, and without immediate emergency intervention, it is going to sink to the bottom of the ocean.
It implies divorce is imminent.
Yes, it's a crisis state.
But what if it isn't a shipwreck? What if it's just normal, everyday grinding difficulty? We don't want to be hyperbolic every time a couple has a fight.
No, we need a milder term.
The idiom we use for this is going through a rough patch, and I want to lean into the implicit metaphor here because it is geographically perfect. It describes the relationship as a vehicle traveling down a road.
A rough patch. The operative word there is patch. It implies a specific, localized, limited area of disruption. It is, by definition, temporary.
Right. Imagine you are driving along a long stretch of highway. The sun is shining, the radio is playing your favorite song, the scenery is beautiful, the suspension of the car is absorbing everything perfectly.
Smooth sailing, or driving, I should say.
Exactly. And then suddenly, bam, 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 you hit a stretch of severe construction, unfilled potholes, grooved pavement. The entire car is vibrating violently.
It's awful.
It is incredibly uncomfortable. It's jarring, maybe even a little scary because you feel like you might lose control of the wheel.
Right.
But critically, you know the entire continent isn't destroyed. You know the highway eventually turns back into smooth asphalt. You just have to grip the wheel and navigate the specific ugly stretch.
That is a perfect encapsulation of a marital rough patch.
Yeah.
And what causes these potholes? Usually it's not a lack of love.
No.
No, it is the intrusion of external stressors. A sudden job loss causing immense financial panic.
Oh, financial stress is huge.
The agonizing stress of a sick child, the exhaustion of caring for aging parents. These massive external pressures seep into the internal ecosystem of the relationship.
They poison the well.
Exactly. Patience evaporates. Grace disappears. And it leads to terrible, uncharacteristic arguments. The smooth ride gets incredibly bumpy.
But the key to surviving a rough patch is knowing how to actively repair the damage once you are through the construction zone. Which gives us our next phrase, kiss and make up.
This is the critical, non-negotiable resolution phase of any long-term bond.
Now, obviously, this isn't just about the physical act of a kiss, right? The phrase feels a bit deceptive in its simplicity.
Extremely deceptive. Kiss and make up is a classic, almost childlike idiom that masks a highly complex, very difficult adult psychological process.
Okay, unpack that for us.
After a terrible argument, there is a literal rupture in the emotional connection. The bridge between the two partners has collapsed.
It's broken.
Making up means doing the heavy lifting to rebuild that bridge. It's the active, conscious process of letting go of righteous anger, swallowing your pride, offering genuine forgiveness, and reestablishing trust.
I think the hardest part of making up is reestablishing friendliness.
Friendliness, yes.
Because you can deeply love someone, you can be committed to them for life, but in the middle of a screaming match about the mortgage, you do not feel very friendly toward them. You view them as an adversary.
You're on opposite teams.
Making up is the act of putting the weapons down and remembering that you actually like hanging out with this person.
Exactly. It's moving from adversaries back to allies. The phrase perfectly captures the relief of a crisis passing. The argument happened, the rupture occurred, but the repair was successful. The bond remains secure.
Okay, but let's look at another threat. What if there is no terrible argument?
A different kind of danger.
Right. What if there are no massive potholes, no external financial crises? What if the road is just really, really long, perfectly straight, and mind-numbingly boring? The reality is, even without major conflict, long-term relationships face a very quiet, very insidious threat. The sheer weight of the daily routine.
The slow, almost imperceptible fading of romance. Attrition by 1,000 mundane Tuesdays.
Right. Which brings us to the urgent need to rekindle the flame. Now, normally people use the analogy of a campfire for this.
Sure.
Blowing on the glowing ashes to restart the fire. But honestly, I think that's a bit of a cliche, and it doesn't really capture the modern reality of a boring routine.
What's your alternative?
I was trying to think of a better way to explain this creeping boredom, and I think a relationship losing its spark is actually a lot like a computer algorithm that has become too perfectly optimized.
An algorithm. Walk me through this.
Think about your social media feed or a music streaming app. When you first start using it, it's exciting, it suggests wild new things, you discover new music, it's vibrant.
It's unpredictable.
But over years of using it, the algorithm learns exactly what you like. It perfectly predicts your every move, and eventually it only feeds you the exact same 5 songs or the exact same type of posts over and over again.
It becomes an echo chamber of predictability.
Yes, it's perfectly safe, but it is completely dead.
That is a brilliant modern analogy. A long-term relationship can easily become a closed-loop algorithm.
Exactly. You wake up at the same time, you have the exact same conversation about who is emptying the dishwasher, you watch the same 3 television shows, you go to sleep.
The algorithm of your marriage is functioning perfectly.
Right. There are no bugs.
Yeah.
But all the surprise, all the novelty, all the passion has been optimized out of existence.
The predictability becomes the poison.
So how do you fix a stuck algorithm? You have to intentionally introduce noise. You have to inject chaos and disruption into the system to force it to learn something new.
And that is exactly what it means to rekindle the flame.
You're right.
It requires active, intentional disruption.
Yes. You can't just wait around hoping the algorithm magically changes itself. You have to actively change the inputs.
The couple has to break the routine.
Exactly. They book a spontaneous romantic trip to an unfamiliar country where they don't speak the language, forcing them to rely on each other in a new way.
Or they start a completely new hobby together, like ballroom dancing or rock climbing, where they are both beginners and have to be vulnerable.
They inject new disruptive data into the relationship to make the system dynamic and alive again.
It's a profound realization that enduring love isn't just a static state of being that you achieve on your wedding day. It is an action you have to repeatedly, intentionally perform.
It requires constant maintenance.
And if a couple can actually do all of these things, if they possess the emotional intelligence to escape the traps of situationships, the courage to burn the ships and take the plunge, the resilience to survive the brutal rough patches, and the creativity to constantly rekindle the flame and disrupt their own boredom, well, they ultimately arrive at the final, most revered state described in our deep dive today.
The ultimate idiom. The absolute pinnacle of the mountain, being together through thick and thin.
This is the definitive linguistic gold standard for true loyalty and unbreakable long-term commitment.
When we talk about this, the image that immediately comes to mind is that classic example. The grandparents who have been married for 50 years.
Right.
Half a century of walking the earth beside the exact same person.
Let's really dissect the specific words here. Through thick and thin. It's an incredibly old phrase originating from the ancient English countryside.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yes. It literally referred to navigating the physical landscape, having to push your way through dark, dense, almost impassable thick forests, and then walking through sparse, barren, thin woods.
The thick and the thin of the physical world.
Exactly. But metaphorically, it grew to signify an absolute vow of presence. It means remaining by someone's side and supporting them under absolutely all circumstances, regardless of the emotional weather.
When life is joyful, abundant, healthy, and rich, the thick. And when life is incredibly challenging, sparse, sick, and painful, the thin.
It means you don't just stay when the algorithm is entertaining and the road is perfectly paved. You stay when the road washes out completely.
Wow.
It is the ultimate expression of that ancient hand-fasting ritual we talked about with tying the knot.
Because the knot didn't break.
Right. The ribbon was tied on the wedding day, but through thick and thin is the living proof that the knot never slipped. It's the promise completely fulfilled.
What an absolutely incredible, sweeping emotional journey we just took through the English language today.
It really was.
Just looking back over the immense landscape we've covered, we started in the frustrating, boundaryless, free trial trap of a modern situationship.
We analyzed the psychological cruelty and slot machine addiction of breadcrumbing.
We talked about finding the terrifying courage to finally burn your ships and take the plunge into the stability of settling down.
We explored the theatrical sociology of popping the question and the ancient physical gravity of tying the knot.
And finally, we looked at the hard, beautiful, everyday mechanics of maintaining that love. Navigating the inevitable rough patches, deliberately disrupting the algorithm to rekindle the flame, and ultimately earning the right to say you stood by someone through thick and thin.
It is a remarkable testament to how much our vocabulary is shaped by our deepest, most primal human needs.
It is.
We've traced the evolution of relationship language across centuries, from ancient Celtic hand-tying rituals in the forest to the modern, dopamine-driven anxiety of an Instagram like. Language is the ultimate mirror of our hearts.
It really is. And now, as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to turn this directly over to you, the listener. Because these aren't just abstract concepts. This is the water we are all swimming in.
This is everyday life.
I want you to really think about these ideas. First, looking at the modern gamified dating landscape, do you think trends like breadcrumbing and situationships are fundamentally making it harder to find true love today than it was in the past?
Are these new, highly specific words just describing a totally new, technologically induced kind of loneliness?
That's a great question. And on a much happier note, looking at the complete other end of the spectrum, do you know a couple in your own life who has managed to stay together through thick and thin?
If you look at those grandparents or that couple who has miraculously made it 50 years, what do you think their secret actually is?
How did they manage to keep the flame rekindled when so many others just let the fire burn out?
It gives you so much to mull over on your commute or while you're making dinner.
It does. And it leaves us with one final, lingering, almost philosophical question to explore on our own.
We've seen how brilliantly and quickly language adapts to our environment. But it leaves us wondering, do we constantly need to invent new, slightly cynical slang, like breadcrumbing, because the technology of dating apps is actively rewiring our human behavior? Is it making us more distant and disposable to one another?
Or will the core historical vocabulary of lifelong commitment, those ancient words conveying gravity, tying the knot, and surviving thick and thin, will those always remain the ultimate foundation of our language?
Simply because, deep down beneath all the screens and apps, human nature inherently and permanently craves that unbreakable bond.
That is a phenomenal, profound thought to end on. Because maybe, just maybe, despite all the modern confusion, despite the endless free trials and the agonizing breadcrumbs, that primal craving for a true, bound-together connection is the one thing that will finally clear up those diagnostic muddy waters we started in. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Take these idioms, look for them playing out in your own life and your own relationships, and we will see you next time.